Welcome back to this mini-series about agentic engineering, specifically with Svelte. Now, in the previous episode, we'd mostly talked about tools that were specifically for our agent. In this episode, we're going to talk about tools that are for our agent, but also for us. Now, before we begin, a small presentation is due. I am Paolo Ricciuti. I lead the Svelte team at Mainmatter, which is an engineering consultancy that specializes in Svelte, Rust, Ember, and we help our clients through their toughest challenges or to adopt the technology of choice. Most importantly, we've been helping a lot of clients to set up the systems to help their engineer to ship faster without compromising on code quality. And this is basically the same thing that we are doing today with our agents. We are helping our agents to ship code faster while keeping an eye on the code that they produce. So let's jump right into today's episode and let's see what those tools are. Let's do a small recap of what we set up in the last few episodes, and then we're gonna start building something. So in the last few episodes, we set up our project, which will be a news aggregator. So as you can see here, we have some initial design. So last week, we spent a bit of time with our agent to design some possible designs. This is basically the design that we choose from last week. So Claude iterated over a bunch of designs. We picked one of the design, which looks like this in dark mode and like this in light mode. And now, obviously, Claude built this design as a single component. So if we switch back to our code, I cleaned up the rest of the designs and the rest of the components, but more or less there is one single component here that has all the information. There are a bunch of errors here, which is mostly about a link written without resolve, which we can probably fix, but we will keep it like this for the moment because we are interested in something different. Now, we want to start breaking up this component into separate components, but because we want to be able to maintain each separate component separately, but also because we want to have a more clean code base. So we want to identify some component that might be a good component by itself. We can definitely have this button. We will definitely have this grid article, and the grid itself, it can also be something interesting. I would say we can start simple, and let's start with a single card component, a single article component. Let's focus on a single component. So we will create a folder with components. Obviously, you don't have to do this, but I just created a components article.svelte. The reason why I did that is because I want us to focus specifically just on article. So I want to remove the editorial design by itself, and I want to show an article. So now when we are looking at the main page, there's nothing here because I want to now prompt Claude to split that editorial design into its own component. And again, you can just generally ask Claude to create the component for you. The only reason why I did it right now is because I wanted to also automatically load that single component into the main page so that we can take a look at that in isolation. So now we can actually prompt open code, so our agent, to extrapolate that component. I want you to extract the article component from editorial design. So we're gonna tag this file into article.svelte. Now, you might remember that last time I said it, that if you're using the MCP, it's good to use the Svelte prompt with the MCP. Now, since then, we also released a new exciting thing, which is the Svelte core best practice skill, which is a very nice skill that teaches your agent about all the things to do and not to do inside Svelte. And from an initial testing, what I found out is that if you're using the skill with the MCP, it's best to not use the prompt, because the skill plus the prompt plus the MCP confuses the agent, which end up either not invoking the skill or not invoking the MCP. While if you only use the MCP and the skill, that's the best result possible. So I'm gonna just say, feel free to use the Svelte core best practices skill if needed. So let's launch this and let's see how the component gets extracted. I don't get why, if this is the plus page Svelte, why it looks like this. Is it D? Yeah, it is up. Oh, because it's still using the grid. Oh, that's very annoying. Oh, because it's still using the editorial design. Oh, screw you. I just spent a lot of time trying to understand why I was seeing the old design despite having to see only the single article before realizing that this was editorial design. It was still there. Now this brings up a very good point that I would have made later in this video, but I think it's an important thing to add it now, which is that one of the key points of vibe coding is that you don't even look at the code. You are embracing the exponential, like they said, and so you are just prompting, and then you look at the website, and then if you like it, you like it. If you don't like it, you just reprompt it again. And for vibe coding, for a project that it's a toy, for something that you don't want to actually use as a product, it's absolutely fine. But if you're doing Agentic Engineer, like we are doing right now, you still want to be on top of the code. You want to make sure that the code quality is up there. You want to make sure that the agent is actually doing what you tell the agent to do. For example, in this case, I said, please only use the article inside the plus page.svelte. I want to see the article in isolation. And what the agent interpreted is, I want the editorial design plus the article there. So obviously agents can be wrong sometimes. So the point is, if you are agentic engineering instead of vibe coding, you want to be on top of the code. To do that, you have to have a way to verify the code that the agent is writing. And as you can see right now, it is pretty difficult. That's the reason why it took me so long to figure out that this line wasn't changed. And you know what's very, very good at doing this? Git. So right now, I purposely not initialized a Git repo inside this repository because I wanted to get to this point. But Git is a very good ally when it comes to coding and agentic engineering. So let's stop the dev server for a second. Let's do git init. This create an initial repository, and obviously there is a bunch of stuff inside. We can git on everything, git commit, message, init, just like every first commit needs to be this. And now we have a very good power at our disposal, because when we ask the agent to make some change, Git will automatically track them for us. Now, there are changes that we have to make to this component. Specifically, they came up with this if featured else, which I really don't like, because if those are two completely separate files, we might just as well use a separate component. But something that I want to point out is that there are some features that this component should have. Right now, this is a very stupid component in the sense that it just takes this as input, like the article as input, and it spit out a bunch of HTML, which is good, to be fair. Like, having a dumb component is good. But there's also some features that are very tied to the article itself. Like, for example, the fact that the summary should be trimmed after a certain number of characters. And maybe we can also add some other requirement, like the fact that if it is cut down, maybe it should have a specific class that fades away the text or something like that. Now, let's ask the agent to first split these two components, because I don't like having them in the same file anymore, and to also add these features. So let's see. I don't like the article being, I don't like article and featured article being one single component with a huge if else at the root. Please split article into two separate components. So let's first ask the agent to do this for us. This will give me the opportunity to show how I use Git when working with an agent, because as we've seen before, it is very difficult to validate the changes that an agent is doing, because, like, yeah, you can see the changelog inside the chart, but it's very hard to read. They are separated. If you want to get back, you need to scroll back and forth, which is a bit annoying. And Git is a very great ally for that, because right now, if we switch to our VS Code, you can see that Git already picked up some changes. In the case of featured article, this is a brand new component, and it has its own problem as usual, like this link without resolve. But yeah, I think this is nice. It's like it has its own CSS. It has the article, and you can see the thing that changed. Like, it removed the feature is equal to false. It removed the type here. It removed the huge if else, and it substituted this with like a single grid article component. It also removed a lot of the featured CSS, luckily, because we don't need them anymore. And then we can see that inside our plus page.svelte, it created and added a new featured article, and it also used it inside our editorial like this. Now, as you can see, like, this is how I like to code. Like, I write my prompt inside my terminal, open code goes ahead and start writing, and then I switch to my VS Code. Sometimes I also do that while the agent is working, just to check if it's doing everything right, and then we switch to something else. There are a few errors here, and most of these come from ESLint, which is this ESLint Svelte no navigation without resolve. This is a very useful rule, but in our case, when we are dealing with a lot of external links, it could be more annoying than useful. So I'm gonna actually disable this rule. And let's do this, and let's say off. So up until this point, we basically just asked the agent to move stuff around. Like, we refactored a big editorial component into a smaller component, and then we refactored that component into two components. Let's actually start building some feature into these components. One feature that I want to add is that if the summary is too long, I don't want the card to go over and over on the summary. So we should have a limit characters, and right now there's something similar as you can see here, but this is actually using this obscure WebKit line clamp and display WebKit box CSS feature that it's just too new to use. Luckily, we can work this with JavaScript because we have JavaScript available on the server when we server-side render this page and on the client. And we can also make it look a bit better because what we can do is that we can say, hey, if there are 150 characters and there are enough characters after the 150 characters, cut to 150 plus 50, for example, and then fade away the last line with CSS. So let's actually prompt the agent to do this change. And this also gives me the opportunity to show you how I actually work when I've already some changes in Git, because as I've said, we are using Git to keep track of the things that changed. And I could technically commit this, but personally, I really don't like to commit half-baked stuff. So something that I do whenever I'm working on with an agent is that I will just stage all these changes. And so as you can see, once the changes are staged, if I make a new change to the article, I can say, I don't know, articles like this, that change will apply here inside the changed file. And I can then use this section of the editor to see what's actually changing. So let's prompt the agent to actually make this change that we were talking about. And we can say new session, and we can say I don't know if this is clear enough for our agent, but we will figure it out. So let's launch it and let's see what it comes up with. So let's take a look at what it actually did. So first thing first, we can actually check what it did because we now have Git. So this changes is the latest changes that the agent did. So I can click on this and I can see that it added a max length of 150, a max octave of 20. It had a trimmed summary, which if article.summary.length minus max offset is less than max length, then it returned the text with article summary and should fade false. Otherwise, it did article.summary.slice 0 to max length and should fade is equal to true. And then it used this class fade away with trimmed summary should fade and trim summary text to actually show the text. And now it removed display WebKit blocks, blah, blah, blah. And it added this class, which is using a mask image to fade away the image, which is very nice. So the AI made this change, and we can make sure that it works by visiting the page and figure out if it's actually working. Maybe we can edit the summary to make sure that it's longer than 150, and then we can maybe inspect the element to see if the fade away class is actually applied or not. But the problem is that all of this requires us to actually do this work. And it's not that we're lazy, like we are fine with doing this work, but we want the agent to also be able to do this work. And to do this work, what you need to do is automated testing. So all this kind of stuff, checking if the class exists, checking what happens when the summary is a bit longer, when the summary is a bit shorter, stuff like that. All these things are all things that are automatically testable. And we should be able to write a test and make it pass, but why do it ourselves when we can actually make the agent do? All of this is what basically was known before, and actually nowadays too, as TDD. So what is TDD? TDD is test-driven development, which basically means that you start from here and you write a test that should fail. So you should basically write a test before you even write the implementation. When you know that you want to implement something, you should start by writing the test that fails so that you can verify that right now the code doesn't work. This is also important because very often when you ask an agent to write a test, it might write a test that is not actually testing the thing that you want it to test. I've seen agents write tests like, okay, I'll take this object, I'll write this object to a file and then check that the file is there or that the file contains this object. So there were literally thousands of lines of test code that were testing literally nothing. I don't think this is a huge issue if you can read the code and figure out that the agent is not testing the proper thing. But one way to also keep the agent in check when writing your test is using test-driven development, because you start from a test that fails. So if it doesn't fail, you don't move to the next phase. So you should prompt your agent to start by writing a failing test. Once the failing test is there, you can move to the second part, which is green. Write code to make the test pass. So you basically write the code that makes the test fail, then you write the code that makes the test pass. Once you have done that, you can hopefully refactor the code to make it better. Otherwise, if it's already good enough, you can stop there. So like the important bit of TDD, in my opinion, is more the red and green part. So you want to see a test failing and then see a test pass. So let's actually go back to our change here. We can copy it if we want. We can revert this change. This is also why I like doing this so much, because I can just, if I'm not fine with a change that the agent did, you can just discard the file and that's it. We are back at square one. And then we can move to our open code and then we can basically use the same prompt as before, but now we can actually add something more. Please develop this following a TDD strategy. Write the test, write a failing test suite for the component, verify that it's failing, make the code change to make the code, the test pass. Okay, so now that we have done this, we can send the prompt and let's see what the agent will do. So it did write this new test suite, and we can say that it's using Vitess browser, which is the right choice. It's using describe, expect it, and it's using render. It's importing the article, and then it's saying should not trim a short summary that is below max length. So right now, this should verify that the test is failing, and we can actually check it within this, and we can even run it ourselves if we want. So we can have a new terminal. We have 3 failed tests, so we can run pm test. We should open a page. Yeah, this is like symptomatic of a test failing. I'll stop it here, it's fine. And we can see that it's rendering the article with a short summary, and it's checking that it is in the document and it does not have the class fade out. Then it's adding should not trim when summary length minus max offset is below max length. So it has like a summary of that has a max length of max like a repeat of max length plus max offset. Another thing that I like to do once I'm satisfied with a file, so like in this case it's working, I can add this to the thing so that if the agent does other changes, I will figure out immediately. So in this case, it says that it should be in the document and it should not have the class of fade out, should trim a long summary and add fade out class. So if it has a very long summary, it creates the article and it gets by text B to be in the document and to have class fade out. And then it's also checking that the text itself, the text content, should be max length plus max offset. That's nice. Should not trim when summary is exactly at the boundary, so that's debatable. Should not have the old WebKit line CSS trimming. I don't like this test. I get why it's using it, but for example, and once again, this is why you should always check the code. This is not a good test, right? Because it doesn't make sense. It only makes sense in the context of this prompt. So we don't want to have this test. We can remove it and we save. And then we can go back to this article and see what changed. And once again, he had a max length of 150, 20. He had a derived of should trim. So it did use a different way to solve it, but it's nice anyway. Displayed summary should trim, it's just the slice, otherwise it's article.summary. And then it is adding the class fade out and displayed summary, and it is using the WebKit mask image with the same gradient. Something, for example, that I would do, use this in a CSS line. And once again, like this is another example of something that like I could prompt the AI to do it, but it's much easier to do it like this. Like I can just literally do this and do fade out is equal to this, and then I can ask like VS Code AI like completion will actually autocomplete this for me. So like this is much easier and less token hungry than just make it do it. Okay, I think that's it for today. We had a very good run. We learned a lot of things. We learned how to use Git and how to stage file to see the agent doing some changes and why it's important to do that, because you still want to keep track of the changes, and this way you can actually keep track of the changes while the agent is doing the changes and eventually steer the agent in the right direction. We learned what TDD is, or like a sort of TDD, and why it's important for an agent to do stuff like this, because we can write a test that fails, and why it's important that they fail first, because sometimes agents write tests that actually will not fail without the change. And this also allowed us to let the agent write the test, while without this strategy of writing a test that fails first, you would have to guess that all the tests written by the agent are actually good. And we split into article and featured article, and yeah, I think we are in a very good place. So next week we're gonna start ramping up our build, because by next week we're gonna talk about something much more interesting, which is how to prompt your agent to get the best result. So blend mode, free prompt, the changes and the difference between the two. So we're gonna start building some more complex feature, because like these were kind of a toy examples to show you something, but we're gonna start ramping up the complexity, because now we actually enter the territory where an agent can actually struggle unless you actually prompt it in the right way. Thank you for watching. Once again, if you have any problem, if you have any questions around this episode, or if you need help for your project, feel free to visit mainmatter.com. We can help you with Svelte, Rust, Ember, whatever. We are a consultancy, so like we have a huge pool of talents. We can really help your project. And thank you for dropping by. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you guys in the next video.